Welcome everyone to Fall Farm Fun. And this is Nutrients for Life's virtual field trip. We are so glad that you're joining us. And we are so excited for the next hour and be able to visit 3 very special farms that are helping us enjoy fall this year. So one of my favorite things about fall is enjoying all the decorating that I get to do. So I have all kinds of gourds and pumpkins in my house that I like to decorate with. And I get my gourds and pumpkins from a pumpkin patch. And today we're going to be joined by Harriet Wagner at her farm, and we're going to learn about her pumpkin patch. Harriet, are you with us? We'll give Harriet a second to join us. And Harriet's joining us from her farm, Wayside Farm Fun. And we're so excited to have her with us.
Good morning, Deborah. I don't know, can you hear me?
I can hear you great. I can't see you yet.
Somebody has to turn my camera on. It was turned off by the host and I can't put it back on.
Okay, we'll get that taken care of. But there we go. Hi, Harriet.
Good morning.
Good morning. And tell us where you're at, Harriet.
So I am in Berryville, Virginia, which is in Northern Virginia. It's close, very close to West Virginia and Maryland, and probably about an hour and 20 minutes from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C.
Harriet, what do you grow on your farm?
So, well, the big thing right now is pumpkins. I've got some samples of pumpkins here, lots of different kinds of pumpkins, but we also grow corn and soybeans, but definitely the popular thing is pumpkins.
And Harriet made a little video for us telling us about her pumpkin farm and taking us actually to the pumpkin patch. So we're going to take a few minutes now and watch that video and learn a little bit more about Harriet's farm in Virginia.
I'm Harriet Wagner, Executive Director of the Nutrients for Life Foundation, and also a pumpkin, strawberry, and corn farmer. Today we are in the pumpkin field. So we grow over 75 acres of pumpkins, and that is about 80 different varieties. So one of my very favorite things to do is search the field for the perfect pumpkin. My perfect pumpkin is a pumpkin called a Cinderella pumpkin, and I've got one right here that is growing so nice. And we're going to search the field for other pumpkins too. So I found a beautiful Germination pumpkin growing in the field. So our pumpkins are planted somewhere around Flag Day, which is June 14th. That's when we first put the seeds in the soil. So I have a variety of seeds here. Just like the pumpkins, they're all different kind of sizes and colors, and each one is a special variety of pumpkin, just like this Germination. When we plant, we use a planting method called no-till, which means we do not plow or till up the soil. These seeds are planted with a pumpkin planter, which is just like a corn planter, and they are drilled right down into the soil and covered up. Pumpkins, from the time that they're planted, take somewhere between 60 and 120 days to maturity until you get this beautiful Germination pumpkin like this. Another discovery in the field is this amazing Cinderella. We're back to my favorite pumpkin of all time, Cinderella. So they can grow a little bit larger, a little bit smaller. Most of them, they have some sort of red tone, but they can be a little bit green. So this is fantastic, large Cinderella. You see the vine, the stem is still attached to the vine. And if you go pick your very own pumpkin at a local farm, you'll notice that because it's still living, They're prickly. They actually won't puncture your skin or anything, but you're like, oh my goodness, there's something a little bit sharp, and that is just the vine, and it's how the pumpkin grows. The vine is super important for a pumpkin because that's how it's going to get all of its water. It's how it's going to get all of its plant nutrients that it needs to grow.
Pumpkins need 3 things, just like most plants, to grow healthy: sunlight, water, and nutrients. A pumpkin plant takes anywhere from 60 to 100 days to produce a mature pumpkin. Some of these seeds turn into giant pumpkins, some small pumpkins, and many different colors. The pumpkin seeds germinate or pop up about a week after they are planted. They first grow with 2 leaves and then add more and more. They eventually grow blossoms or flowers that turn into a pumpkin once the blossoms have been pollinated by a bee. Pollination is super important to pumpkin plants. With no bees, there would be no pumpkins. Pumpkins cannot be grown in the same soil each year, but instead have to rotate crops every 3 years due to soil diseases. This jack-o'-lantern pumpkin, before it turned orange, was green, and before it was green, it was a little baby, very light green pumpkin, just like the one we see here. The stages of the pumpkin are first the seed, then there's a baby plant that comes out with just a couple of leaves, then we have the blossom. Then after the blossom is pollinated, a very small baby pumpkin, and then it grows and grows and grows, and in this case turns into an orange jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. There are about 1.5 billion pounds of pumpkins produced in the United States each year. The top pumpkin producing states are Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and California. Pumpkins are grown on every continent except Antarctica. This pumpkin is called a full moon. It's a giant white pumpkin that weighs about 60 pounds. The largest pumpkin grown weighed in at 2,623 pounds. To put that in perspective, the average bull weighs 2,400 pounds. So this pumpkin may be large for our U-pick field, but it's not large at all compared to the largest pumpkins grown.
Wow, Harriet, that was really amazing to see all of the different types of pumpkins that you grow on your farm. So can you tell us where you're at right now? Because I see some interesting things behind you.
So I am in our barn. It's a little bit windy outside, so I decided to kind of get out of the field and set up in the barn. But this is the barn we actually use for field trips. And I don't know if you can fully see, but there is the pumpkin life cycle right behind my head if I move over a little bit. And, you know, it's kind of, I've got right here the seeds. It all starts with that seed. So when you guys are getting out of school in June, that's when we first plant the seed. That goes into the ground, and then it takes about 10 days for germination. Germination is when the seed is warm enough in the soil and gets enough moisture that it pops up right out of the soil, and then it grows all summer long, and eventually we have those blossoms, which were shown in the video. They're flowers, but we call them blossoms because each of those blossoms, if pollinated, will turn into a pumpkin. And then we start harvest here about September 1st. So all summer while you're on vacation, enjoying that summer break, our pumpkins are growing strong out in the field.
So I just want to remind our classes that are with us today. I see a couple people raising their hands, and we definitely want you to ask questions, but you can submit your questions into the Q&A. And we'll have those up and we'll go ahead and we can ask Harriet those questions if you have any questions about her farm or raising pumpkins. So don't forget to submit those questions in there as we go through the field trip and meet all of our farmers today. So I'm not going to call on you if you raise your hand. You just need to submit your questions in that Q&A box. So Harriet, your farm's kind of special because you have visitors that come to your farm. So tell us, do they come and pick their own pumpkins? Do you pick all the pumpkins for them?
Yes. So the primary way of getting pumpkins on our farm is definitely pick your own, which is why we pretty much top out at about 60 pounds. If any of you have tried to move a 60-pound pumpkin, it's not exactly easy because they're big and round. And so you got to kind of get your arms under them and you got to use your belly to like carry it. And so anything more than that becomes really difficult to move. Several years ago, we did plant some of those we planted them large to be about 250-pound pumpkins. And then we realized we couldn't move them. Neither could anybody else who comes out to the field. That's just too hard, too heavy to move. So yeah, most of our pumpkins, customers, visitors come out and kind of explore the field and find their perfect pumpkin. Everybody has a different perfect pumpkin. I mentioned mine is a Cinderella pumpkin. I love, love, love it. Some people really like the large jack-o'-lanterns called the Gladiator. It's just everybody has a different favorite pumpkin, and that's part of what makes going to a pumpkin field so much fun, because you move those leaves and underneath every leaf is a new discovery of the pumpkin.
Harriet, we just had a great question submitted. And they want to know, do the different kinds of pumpkins have to be separated from each other in the field? So when you plant them, do they have to be separated?
That is a great question. So the answer is no. I'll tell you, our U-pick field, they are, again, I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm trying to hold this up, but when we put seeds in the hopper, and these are all mixed in, all the colors together, we put them in the pumpkin planter hopper all together. So you're going to get a jack-o'-lantern right next to a Cinderella, next to a Blanco, next to a full moon. They're all mixed in. On our wholesale fields, we do separate them out because that just makes it easier for us to pick. So we can do them like all the jack-o'-lanterns at one time. But when you're exploring a field, we want them all mixed in, and it doesn't affect the quality of the pumpkins at all.
That's really interesting, and all the varieties. We did have another question come in, and this is from a second grade class, also in Virginia. They're in Roanoke. And they asked, why is the Cinderella pumpkin your favorite, and how many different pumpkin varieties do you grow on your farm?
Okay, so we grow, if you include the different types of boards and stuff, it's about 80 different varieties. The Cinderella, I have a baby Cinderella pumpkin here. This is just a tiny one. So the reason the Cinderella is so special to me, I like the different, so this is almost like a red orange here, but then see how this is like a green. So it can be red and green. It has really great colors. And then it's more flat. So what I like to do is I love to stack them. I stack them on top of each other and make what I think are these beautiful pillars of pumpkins. And it's also actually a really good cooking pumpkin. So I don't cook with pumpkins during pumpkin season because I'm too busy, but at like come November 1st, I love to make a pumpkin stew and I cook it in the Cinderella pumpkin. It's the perfect pumpkin to make a pumpkin stew.
Oh, that sounds delicious and very creative to use the pumpkin to cook it, put it in. We did have another question from a fifth grade class in California, and they would like to know about how many pumpkins do you actually grow each year? Too many to count, maybe.
Guys, you got me stumped. I do not know. I don't think I can count that high. It's not even, so I'll tell you what we do for wholesale. So grocery stores, kind of farm markets, they buy our pumpkins in pallets. And so like a jack-o'-lantern has to be a certain size. So it's sized at 25 pumpkins per pallet or 30 or 35 pumpkins per pallet, which is like a huge box. Basically, it's a wooden pallet with a cardboard box on top of it. And those are all sized appropriately. So I don't like, I can't even say millions.
So many, too many to count. And we also had another question from that class. They wanted to know if pumpkins grow better in a colder or a warmer climate.
Great question. So pumpkins, certainly like any other crop, the soil temperature needs to be warm enough for them to grow. Is Virginia the ideal place to grow pumpkins? No. The reason it gets too hot. Pumpkins don't like it so very hot, but they don't like it really cold either. So like Minnesota may not be the best place to grow. Those 5 top pumpkin producing states that I talked about in my video, you've got like Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and California. Where are those geographically located? They're kind of in the middle of the country, and that would be your kind of top temperature places. But the other thing is pumpkins need a good amount of rain, but not too much rain. So if it rains too much, pumpkins will get they get disease easier. But if it's too dry, then they don't grow because pumpkins are so much made up of water. Then you end up with small pumpkins. But if it's too wet, that's more detrimental than if it's too dry.
So you showed us some of the seeds that you plant and the variety of pumpkin seeds that you plant. Can you tell us how many seeds you plant on you said you have about 75 acres of pumpkins. How many seeds do you plant?
So every winter, December, when the crop's all harvested and everything's kind of put away, that's when I order the seeds. So there's different seed companies that pumpkin farmers order their seeds from. We use 4 different companies, and we probably order, thousands and thousands and thousands of seeds, maybe somewhere between 50,000 to 75,000 seeds every year. Do all of them get planted? No, but it's always better to have a little bit extra than not enough.
Wow, that's a lot of seeds to plant in the ground. We do have a question submitted here that's a little bit tougher. And so they asked, today they learned that pumpkins are actually a fruit because they have seeds. Why is this fruit called a pumpkin? That's a tough one.
Because so yes, it is a fruit. With the seeds on the inside, it is definitely a fruit. Everybody thinks of a pumpkin as a vegetable, but it is a fruit.
So we're still getting lots of questions. Everybody's doing a great job submitting their questions for you, Harriet. One of the questions that's submitted from Oak Grove, Colorado is, what is the best part of being a farmer?
Oh gosh, there's so many great things. And I think it's like anything that you really like to do, but I love to watch every year starts a blank slate. So at the beginning of the year, it's all new every single year. Your crop is brand new, and there's always that hope that the weather is going to be perfect this year, and the conditions are going to be great, and you're going to have the best crop ever. So I really love just the hope every year that comes with growing a crop. And then it's also just providing, like with strawberries, with pumpkins, there's a lot of happiness with that. And I really enjoy, I enjoy happiness, and I enjoy being able to give that to others.
That's wonderful. Now, Harriet, I know we have a lot of questions that we haven't had a chance to get to, but we do have to start moving on to our next farmer, which is interesting because you grow several things at your farm there and you have visitors. And one of the activities you have for them is to walk through a cornfield. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're going to go on a walk right now. We'll see how this works. Hopefully you all are able to stay with me. So I'm in the barn, but we are going to walk to the corn maze. So it's a cornfield that we do cut out paths and hope that people get lost, but not too lost. So here we are. I'm just going to turn my camera around. You can see a little bit of what's going on at the farm right now. And then this is the pathway down to the corn maze. And you can see the field in front of me. And so
wow, your farm looks amazing and so much fun for a fall visit.
Thank you. So this field, we actually do harvest the corn. So it's used for people to find their way through, but we do harvest it at the end of the season. And this is the maze this year. So if there's any Sonic the Hedgehog fans out there, this is a tribute to the 30th birthday of Sonic the Hedgehog. So this is entering the cornfield. And there's two different, you can do an easy or hard maze. We're going to just enter this easy maze. And you can see that there's, the corn's dried up now. So it's not far, you know, probably another month and we will harvest it. But the reason that it's really hard for people to say, well, how do you get lost so easy? In a corn maze, the corn is planted in two different directions. So it's planted like horizontal and vertical. So there's no way for you to follow a row out. A row does not exist.
Well, I think it's fun to get lost in a cornfield in the fall. So that's really exciting. Harriet, we want to thank you for sharing with us about your pumpkins. I think we might chat with you again later. But right now we're going to say goodbye to Harriet and we're going to introduce Brock Loy, and he is coming to visit us from Illinois, from his family farm in Illinois, where he raises corn. And his corn isn't so much a corn maze, but he's got a farm operation, and I think they're in the middle of harvesting right now. So hopefully Brock can join us. Brock, are you with us? Well, while we wait a minute, I just want to remind everybody, while we're talking to him at his farm in Illinois, if you have questions, if you think of questions while we're visiting, go ahead and submit those in the Q&A. You're doing a great job of doing that. We saw that when we were visiting with Harriet. And while we watch Brock's videos, we'll be able to submit questions through that time as well. So I think Brock's with us. There he is.
I'm here.
Brock, how are you this
Good morning,
morning?
Deborah. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Great.
Good.
So tell us where you're at in Illinois.
Well, we're located in Beaverville, Illinois, which is in northeast Illinois, kind of northeast central, right about 3 miles from the Indiana border. And we're about an hour and a half south of Chicago, about straight south.
And you grow corn on your farm, but you also grow several crops. Is that correct?
Yeah, we grow corn and soybeans primarily. We do grow a little sweet corn, not for commercial or for sale. We just grow it for our own family and friends.
And you don't use your cornfield for a corn maze for entertainment, but what do you use your corn for?
We use our corn mainly for, we harvest it, and then most of our corn, which is called field corn, is used primarily for animal feed, for ethanol production, for a lot of other grocery goods, maybe not that you don't eat off the cob, but so like cornflakes, Frito-Lay, that type of thing.
So a large variety of things.
Yeah.
Well, You made a video for us telling us a little bit more about your farm and showing us some of the things that happened and harvesting. So we're going to take a few minutes now to watch that video so we can learn a little bit more about your operation. So
Sure.
Let's watch our video and then we'll be back to ask some questions about the Loy farm.
Hi, I'm Haley Sergey, the Illinois Regional Representative for the Nutrients for Life Foundation. Today, we're visiting my family farm. So we're going to meet my family, learn about the crops that they grow, the nutrients they need, and some really big pieces of machinery that make farming a whole lot easier than it was in the past. So let's meet the family. This is my brother, Brock, my uncle, Howard, and my dad, Harold. This trio runs our farm.
Welcome to Loy Farms.
In Illinois, they have the right climate and the right soil to grow a whole lot of corn. In fact, in Illinois, there's about 11 million acres of corn grown every year. So let's go talk to my brother Brock and find out a little bit about the farm, this wonderful plant that provides so much, and how it's grown.
Hi, we farm about 1,800 acres in Iroquois County, Illinois. And an acre is about approximately the size of a football field without the end zones. Next to me, we have what's called field corn, and that's what we grow. Field corn is different than what you find in the store as sweet corn. This kind of corn is either used for animal feed or ethanol production or in a lot of different things that we buy in our everyday lives. So let me tell you a little bit about this corn plant. So what you're seeing here right now is what we call a fully mature plant, which means it's ready to be harvested. Now during the summertime, these plants are lush and green, but now it's fully mature. So let me explain some of the parts of the plant. You have the stalk or the stem. These are the leaves. Now, like I said, during the summertime, these would be really lush and green. And down here you have the roots, or what we call the brace roots, and there's roots under the ground. That's what takes up the nutrients out of the ground to help make it a healthy corn plant. Up here is the tassel. This is what pollinates the individual corn seeds on the ear. And you find the ear, and that's what everybody wants to know about, is right down here. And these are what's called shucks, and they what the ear is in. Well, let's pull these back and see the ear. And here you have an ear of corn, and that's what's get harvested. And there's approximately 800 kernels on an average ear, and the average ear is about 16 kernels around. So during the pollination process, pollen falls off of these tassels and lands on each one of these silks. And each silk is a little strand, and each silk goes to each individual kernel. So that's a lot of silk strands. As my sister Haley said earlier, Illinois has really good soil for growing crops. Corn requires 3 main nutrients for health. Those are in order of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. If the soil tests show that there's not enough of those nutrients in the soil, then farmers apply what's called fertilizer. The way I like to describe fertilizer for corn and soybeans is like they're kind of like vitamins that you take every day. They make you strong and healthy. And we ensure those by what levels we need by getting our ground tested. And also we rotate our crops between corn and soybeans. And that's because corn needs a lot of nitrogen to grow. But corn isn't very good at getting nitrogen out of the air. But you know what is good for getting nitrogen out of the atmosphere? Soybeans. And that's why most farmers tend to rotate their crops year to year between corn and soybeans. And then if you plant corn after soybeans, then the corn plant can use that nitrogen.
So let's go learn how it's harvested. And even more fun, let's go for a ride. So Brock, why don't you tell me a little bit about what we're getting ready to do now?
Okay, right now we're pulling alongside the combine because he's full of corn, and he's going to be dumping the corn into what I'm pulling behind me, which is called an auger cart, which is basically a wagon with an auger on it that holds the grain so the combine can keep running. And then once I am full, then I take the grain on to the semi that's waiting and then dump it into the semi. And the reason why a person would use this is that it saves time from the combine having to stop and go and dump into the semi each time. So the combine can keep running, which is a lot more efficient.
As you can see, a combine is a big piece of equipment. and it's essential to harvesting all this corn. All right, here we go. The corn harvest has begun. So Uncle Howard, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on here?
Well, we're harvesting corn, and corn is about 17.5% moisture. And with the combine, we're taking the corn in, and it pulls the ear off the stalk, and it goes through the machine and takes the corn off the cob, and it separates the cob from the kernels, and it separates it all out, and then it goes into a hopper. And in a little bit, you'll see it going into the auger cart.
Which is where we just rode over there with Brock. So he's driving side by side.
And here comes the corn.
And there it goes. So Dad, why don't you tell me where we're headed?
We're headed to the grain elevator to dump this load. It'll go into storage.
Now Dad, as we approach the grain elevator, is there anything specific that you have to do?
As I approach the scale, I will open up the tarp so that they can use their large probe to take a sample out of the load to see what the moisture and the quality of the grain is.
And so they're going to measure the moisture of the kernels. What's the most ideal moisture?
On corn, you want it to be 15%.
So we're driving on the scale to get weighed and to get the measure taken.
Now that we have our ticket, it explains who gets a portion of the grain that was in the truck, what the percentages are. It has the test weight of the grain, which is a measure of quality, and it has the moisture. This particular load was 15.8.
And then we're off again. Time to head back to the field for another load to do it all over again.
Wow, that's quite a process that you showed us, from learning about the corn plant to how you harvest and where you take the grain. Before we ask you some questions, I just want to remind our classes and students that they can submit their questions into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many live as we possibly can. We do have quite a few submitted, so thank you for those. When you do submit them, if you want to type who's asking the question and where you're at, so we can share where the questions are coming from with Brock as we ask those questions. So I found it really interesting in the video how many people it took to harvest and how you all work together through that process to make it really efficient.
Yeah, it's quite the dance, that's for sure. You got to take practice and just time to get everybody in sequence and stuff. And thank goodness for handheld radios to talk to one another. So
lots of communication going on there.
Yeah.
So our first question is from Ryder, and he wanted to know, why do you grow corn?
Well, Ryder, that's a good question. most of the Midwest grows it. The soil and the climate and the is suitable for it, and there's demand for it, like there has been for since settlers first started here, I guess. But I guess that'd be the main reason why is like it does really well here, and the markets for it, and that's the main reason why we grow it. So
it's suitable for where you live, and
yeah,
there's a demand for it, so it all seems to work
right.
together.
Yep.
So we did have a question from a second grade class in Pennsylvania, and they want to know, how long does a corn plant last until it dies?
I saw that question down the Q&A. I've been keeping it. I was adding it up. It's about 4 to 5 months, I would say. It kind of depends. I mean, different corn varieties will mature faster than others. Just depends on which ones you want. But I would say on average about 4 to 5 months. So we normally here in Illinois and a lot of the Midwest, corn's planted about April and May, and then it's harvested usually between September through November. Now, I know they grow corn in Texas, and they might be planting it in maybe even February or March and harvesting it, in practically late July or August. So, but I know here in the Midwest, the majority of it's planted between April and May, and then harvested anywhere from September through November.
So you're right in the middle of harvest season right now.
Yeah, even though I'm not in a tractor right now, maybe the afternoon session, I may be in a tractor stuff. We're cutting beans right at the moment, and it's a little damp here this morning. So we're kind of in between there, but maybe this afternoon we might be in there. So you caught me at home.
So tell me, you said you're cutting beans. What does that mean?
That means, well, in the video there, you saw me in front of the bean field. So cutting beans, the people will talk about the terminology. You pick corn and you cut beans. And when we mean by cutting beans is that the bean head that's put on the combine has a sickle in front of it with knives that move back and forth. So the bean plant's a lot smaller than a corn stalk. So it sits there and cuts them off like a little knife, and then it feeds it in. And that's how the process of harvesting beans takes place.
That's interesting how the terms are different for each
Yeah.
crop.
Yeah, I know. Even though our own family members get it wrong, and you get corrected. It's not. You don't cut corn. You pick corn and you cut beans. So
we did have another question from Mrs. LaFrance, and they want to know, how tall does each stalk grow on average?
On average, I would say probably around 10 to 12 feet. There again, different varieties will be different heights. I've seen some corn grows really really up to 14 feet. And when you're next to that, it feels like you're almost in the Amazon rainforest there, as tall as they can get. But it really depends on variety. Sometimes it can be only 8 foot tall. Like, for instance, sweet corn might only be shoulder high, but field corn might be, like I said, 14. But I would say on average, probably about 10 to 12 feet in height.
So taller than all of us.
Yeah, definitely.
So I thought this was an interesting question. Mrs. Helly's class, second grade class, wants to know if there's such thing as green corn. So the corn we saw harvested had already died. It was kind of brown. Mm-hmm. So would there be any time that they would harvest it green?
Yes, somewhat green. When they're chopping silage, that for like dairy or for cattle feed, they'd be green, and they call silage choppers and stuff, which kind of looks similar to a combine, only they're taking everything in. They don't just we just pick the ear off, and then it takes the kernels off the cob, and we only keep the kernels. Everything else is spit out the back end of the combine to be reused and decomposed and stuff in the soil. But that's when they would maybe chop green corn, is to make animal feed for it. But our corn is green during most of the growing season. It's just once it matures, then it dries out and browns up.
That's interesting that for different purposes, you harvest it differently.
Yep.
So here's a great question. It's actually 3 questions in one from Mrs. Paul Moore's class in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay.
And they have 3 questions. Do you have to water your corn? And then they also want to know, what unit do you weigh your corn in, and how much corn was in that truckload we saw harvested in the video? So there's a lot to unpack there. But so lots of questions.
All right. The order, No, we don't water the corn. Mother Nature waters the corn for us, so we rely strictly on rain. Now, some people do have what they call irrigation or irrigation pivots that they can turn on and water the corn and other crops as needed. We do not have any irrigation pivots on our farms. So we rely, like I said, strictly on Mother Nature to get that rain when we need it during the growing season. The second question was, what was the second question again?
What unit do you weigh your corn in?
Oh, okay. The corn is weighed in pounds. So usually the scales at the elevator weigh it in pounds. So you get the difference there of what the grain, you have to weigh full, then you have to weigh empty. And the difference there of that weight is how much grain was on that truck. And usually those are, and then that's converted into what they call bushels. And for instance, the standard for a bushel of corn is 56 pounds. So it takes 56 pounds of weight to equal 1 bushel. So, and then the third question was how many bushels were on, or how much was on that grain? So approximately on that truck was probably about between, I'm guessing anywhere between 900 to 1,000 bushel on that truck. So that would be about 56,000 pounds. So
That's a lot onto one truck.
Yeah.
Well, Brock, we really enjoyed talking with you this morning and learning more about your farm, and we'll let you get back to harvesting.
Okay.
And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with our students.
My pleasure.
Now we're going to see if Harriet's available and go back to her farm. I know that she has a super unique operation where we know that she's growing pumpkins, and we saw that she also has some corn there and the corn maze, but I think that she also has some other things going on. So Harriet, can you tell us what one of the favorite things, most popular things that you have going on your farm that a lot of people wait in line for?
Yes, Deborah, I can. Apple cider donuts. We absolutely, people will wait in line for a very long time for a warm apple cider donut. And one of the key things for apple cider donuts is sugar. Gotta have the sugar on the donut.
Oh, we all kind of love a little sugar, don't we? And I bet it takes a lot of sugar to make all the donuts for those that are visiting your farm. And we think about the fall and how much candy we go through and how much sugar it takes. And so we know Harriet's got to get her sugar for her donuts, but we wonder where that sugar comes from. So we're going to now go meet Dirk Driscoll, and he's in Idaho. So I think Dirk is there with Rick. So Rick, there we go. There's Rick and Dirk. Welcome. And thanks for joining us today. So Dirk, tell me what you grow on your farm.
We grow sugar beets, we grow potatoes, we do a lot of wheat, and we do a little bit of corn for silage, and alfalfa that we raise and ship to China.
Wow, you have quite the diversity on your farm. And I understand that right now you're harvesting sugar beets, or you have been harvesting sugar beets. Is that correct?
That's right. In order to make those M&Ms, and from all that granulated sugar and everything, you know what, that's what we're doing now, trying to get the sugar to the market.
And I think Harriet at her farm is very thankful for your sugar, so they can have lots of those fresh donuts for their customers. So we're going to take a few minutes here. Dirk helped us put together a video about his farm. So we're going to share that video with you. And while you watch that video, remember to put your questions in the Q&A. And when we come back, we'll have a few questions for you about your farm from the students.
Hi, my name is Rick Phillips, and I'm with the Nutrients for Life Foundation, and we're in southeast Idaho today on the beautiful Snake River Plain. We're talking to Dirk Driscoll, who's a partner of Driscoll Brothers Farm. Tell us a little bit about your operation here, Dirk.
We are Driscoll Brothers of American Falls, Idaho. We farm about 25,000 acres. Myself and 3 other brothers form Driscoll Brothers Partnership. And then we have 9 of our next generation of son-in-law, sons,
nephew-in-laws that are in the business as well.
And daughters.
And daughters, yes, thank you. And so it's a family farm that our father and mother started back in 1952. Farm sugar beets, potatoes, wheat, alfalfa, and corn. We have about 5,000, 6,000 acres of sugar beets, 8,000 acres of potatoes, and about 8,000 acres of wheat, and the rest is in corn and alfalfa. So it keeps us busy. To grow a good sugar beet, you need good nutrients in the soil. And so good fertilization and irrigation, which we have here, a great aquifer for our water, but a lot of nitrogen, about 100 units of nitrogen we use for the sugar beet crop. And from the potatoes the year before, we don't have to put on phosphate because there's a carryover of that, and potassium that we don't have to use that because of the carryover. So we planted early in the spring, about the end of March, 1st of April, and we planted the seeds about 4.5 inches apart. And it's amazing that by the end of the year, they grow quite large through the irrigation, fertilization, and cultivation. And now we're in the sugar beet harvest here at the end of October. Yes, now we're seeing the tractor, that beautiful John Deere green and yellow tractor, pulling the defoliator, which is a beater that beats the tops, the leaves, off of the sugar beets. And it has a little disc behind it on each of the 12 rows that tops the top of the beet off to about 1/4 size, taking the crown off, and then it makes it ready for the harvester to come in behind to pull the beets, pulling them up and put them into the truck ready to transport to the piling ground. Now the beet harvester has set down. The puller wheels are pulling and lifting the beets up next to some paddles that beat them into the bed as they convey them across to go into the squeeze chain that go up and into the conveyor that conveys them into the truck itself as it gets ready to transport it into the beet pile. We're at the beet piling ground now, where the truck has arrived to self-unload the sugar beets with a hydraulic bed that is a multi-purpose bed for potatoes, wheat, and sugar beets. And you'll notice the pile in the back of the truck is getting smaller because they're dumping it into the gray beet piler that will then clean the beets as they go up the conveyors and then into the pile of the beets as they get ready to then be shipped to the factory for making granulated sugar. You're just seeing right now that the beets go up there and they're over a bunch of cleaning rollers that clean out the dirt and debris. So you have as clean a beets as you can that go into this final piling ground of the sugar beets.
Well, that's really fascinating. I learned a lot about sugar beets and the process of growing them. And I thought it was really interesting because we just watched Brock's video with corn, and we saw that how it took a lot of coordination and teamwork to harvest and everybody in the right places at the right time. And it was the same thing with sugar beets, all the equipment moving. And I'm sure that takes a lot of communication and coordination for them to harvest efficiently like we saw in the video. So I do want to remind classes as we're visiting, go ahead and keep submitting your questions, and don't forget to put where you're from and your class so we can share that as we ask the questions. I have a great question that came in, Dirk. They're from Louisiana, and they grow sugarcane because their climate is semi-tropical. But they've never tasted sugar from sugar beets. Is there a difference, the sugar cane versus the sugar beets?
You know, they say there's no difference. The end result is the same. I just have a tendency to feel like when I'm eating the sugar from a sugar beet, other than a sugar cane, it just seems maybe the sugar beet's a little bit sweeter.
Not that
Maybe
you're
I'm
biased.
biased with that. No, but the end result is the same.
Okay, so Mrs. Finkenshire, her class would like to know if they would see your sugar in a grocery store. So does the sugar
Yes.
from your sugar beets ever make it to the grocery store?
Yes, it's food club. There's different brands of sugar, but they come from the same factory that we have, that is the Amalgamated Sugar Company, and it's under White Satin Sugar is the brand name. And yet you may eat other company sugar. It may be our sugars. There's sometimes they're just blended together, but I'm sure that this sugar they're a big part of the consumers in America, the amalgamated sugar, the white satin sugar.
And so the other part of their question was, would your sugar make it to California? So can we find your sugar all over the United States, or is it a regional?
Yes, if you're eating M&Ms or candy bars or whatever, yes, you're going to find the sugar. You just may not know that it came from Idaho, but once the different consumers or companies that buy it for the products, it'll be all over the United States and even in the world.
Oh, so we can find your sugar everywhere. It's traveling.
Right. If it tastes just a little sweeter than normal, it's probably from the Amalgamated Sugar Company in Idaho.
Yours is just a little bit sweeter. So we had a 5th grade class in Ventura, California, and they wanted to know if you utilize all of the sugar beet plant when you're harvesting.
Yes, the sugar beets, once they're harvested and the leaves go back in the ground to go ahead to create a roughage in that's for the next year's crop. But the beet itself, when it goes to the factory, what isn't made into sugar is made into beet pulp that is fed to cattle. So yes, they use all of the beet.
So it's all getting used. That's great. We have a question from Linux, and they want to know, do you grow candy corn? So does any of your sugar go into candy corn?
No, but that's a great idea. We need to explore that possibility. That's a great idea. I like that.
You'd make that candy corn just that much sweeter with your sugar.
That's right.
So Mrs. Helly's 2nd grade class wanted to know if people ever tour your farm.
Yes, on occasion, we have people that stop from different places throughout the United States that have come here, and our other neighbors and friends and that too. But also we have some from other countries throughout the world that come and set up tours for that. So yes, that's something that usually happens 2 or 3 times a year.
I bet that's fascinating for them to be able to see it in person. But I'm so glad that we could visit your farm virtually with our students today. We have another great question from a 5th grade class in California, and they wanted to know, how did your family start in this type of farming and growing sugar beets?
Well, years ago, my great-grandparents came to Idaho, and then they settled. They were mainly beef cattle farm, and then they started farming because the cattle prices were somewhat low. But then, so my grandparents started that, my dad started, and then we just took it from that point. So we're about a 4th, 5th generation here in Idaho as we've gotten into the agriculture business.
Wow, that's quite a story, and family farm continuing generations after generations, which kind of leads into Mrs. Spurgeon's 3rd grade class in Wichita. And they wanted to know how long you've worked on the farm. It sounds like your whole life.
Yes. I feel like I was born with a hoe in my hand to hoe those sugar beets when I was first a little boy. I couldn't remember anything different, but I've done this all my life. And we love farming. It's just, my name is Dirk. Some people think my name is Dirt with a T instead of a K, but I have to remind them it's Dirk and not Dirt, but it's just what we are. We love it.
That's amazing. So it's just kind of part of who your family is. And so Kaysen in Montrose, Colorado wants to know, how much sugar beets do you grow?
We grow 6,000 acres of sugar beets. And that is about, I was doing a little bit quick. Let me just see if this thing comes up here just quickly. Well, it takes 52,000 seeds in 1 acre, and that means there's 312 million seeds that we plant in order to get the sugar beet crop for the year.
That's amazing. So do you know how many sugar beets it takes to make a bag of sugar?
Boy, you know what? I don't. You've asked a question that I need to go research now. I do not know that.
That's
In
a
a
tough,
sugar
we gotta
beet,
throw a couple tough ones at you.
Well, let me just say this. In a sugar beet, about anywhere from 16 to 18% of the beet will come out as granulated sugar when it's done.
Okay, well, that helps us understand a little bit. So what's your favorite part about farming?
Oh, I love the harvest because you've worked all year to plant, to cultivate, to fertilize, to irrigate. And now we're right in the harvest season where it's the sort of the fun of the harvest from all the work of all year. And it's sweet. And then you let the winter storms come and Thanksgiving's here and we give thanks and enjoy and get ready for Christmas.
Well, you get to see your accomplishments through the year. That success is at the end. We have a great question here. They want to know if you can eat raw sugar beets right out of the field.
You can. We do that. We always take a little knife and just carve off a little bit. It doesn't taste very sweet. Not that it's bitter, but it doesn't taste as good as a good M&M out of the package.
So we have a 5th grade class in California, and they want to know if it snows on your farm, and does the snow hurt the plants?
It does snow, but usually in the winter season. But every once in a while, even last year, we had just a little snow, usually 1 or 2 or 3 inches, but we have to wait a few days for that to melt. The soil then is ready again to go in and finish the harvest season. So we hope the winter storms come in winter, not in fall, or certainly not in summer or spring.
Those early storms might slow down that harvest, huh?
Exactly.
So how does the weather the rest of the time of the year impact your crops? So Mrs. Ellis's class in Texas asked that. How does the weather the rest of the year impact your growing season?
Sugar beets love hot weather. Basically, our weather is around an 80 degree during the summer, 85. This year, we've been in the 90 to 100 quite a bit, and that makes the sugar beet put on more tonnage. So that's maybe adverse to other crops that we grow a little bit, but to the sugar beet, they love the hot weather. So we start out in the spring and we plant early enough that hopefully we avoid the frost of the spring to get the summer heat, and then they get the nice fall weather to do the harvest.
So we heard from Harriet and Brock both that their crops, they rotate. So like the pumpkins, they can't grow on the same field every year. And Brock said he rotates the soybeans and the corn on his field. So do you do the same thing with your crops, or can
Absolutely.
you grow the sugar beets on the same field every year?
We grow different crops. We rotate just like Brock and Harriet had indicated. So we'll do sugar beets, we'll plant that to wheat, and then that next season we'll go to potatoes and then to alfalfa or to corn, and then it'll go back to sugar beets again. So it is a rotation.
So one of the questions we had submitted before our call was, what do you do to prepare the field for planting? So what are some things that you look for to make sure your field is ready to plant?
Great question. When we finish the year before crop, we'll take in the fall and we'll disc the field, then we'll plow the field. And then in the spring, we'll come in and we'll put a little fertilizer on and then pack the field and firm it up so the beet planter could then plant the sugar beets. And then we cultivate and go through the year.
So there's a lot of preparation that goes into making sure you're ready to plant. Our students might not know what fertilizer is. Can you tell us what you mean by putting fertilizer on the field?
Yes, we'll use 100 units of nitrogen fertilizer that we'll put that down. That's all that we basically need for this crop of that growing season, because the crops that we've used previous to that, especially potatoes, have enough phosphate and potassium that has a carryover that we don't need. There's enough in the soil that we don't need to put that on, but we do need the nitrogen that we put on.
So the nitrogen and the potassium, those are foods that our plants need to grow to be healthy and to produce a successful crop. So you're providing that food for the plant.
Yes,
That's amazing.
Nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium are key elements for our growth of our sugar beets.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Dirk. Thank you, students, for being able to submit questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all your questions, but we were so glad to be able to visit Harriet's farm in Virginia and visit the Loy farm in Illinois and be able to visit Dirk's farm in Idaho. I hope that you enjoyed this virtual field trip where we got to travel and learn about some of those fun fall activities that we get to do in the fall. And remember, as you're participating in your fall activities, that all of those things come back to the farm, and the farm are helping us enjoy our fall. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great day and you have a very fun fall season. Thank you. Bye-bye.